The movie opens in the suburbs of Maine as a caravan of several cars moves into an upper-middle-class community. Lawyer Billy Halleck watches the motorcade from his bungalow, amused at how old and beat up the cars look. He then gets ready for his office and heads downstairs for breakfast. But first, he steps on a weighing machine in his bathroom. To his disappointment, the scale points out that he is a whopping 300 pounds. Billy is morbidly obese and has been struggling to keep his weight in check for a long time. He then joins his wife, Heidi, and their daughter, Linda, for breakfast. It is revealed that Heidi has forced Billy to get on a special diet since last week. She hands him a fruit juice and asks if he has made any progress with his weight. Billy lies that he is 297 pounds, the same weight he was last week. But in reality, he has been gaining weight despite her best efforts. After breakfast with his family, Billy goes to court to defend his client, a mafia boss called Richie the Hammer Ginelli. He's a truly despicable man who should be in jail, but Billy proves there isn't enough evidence and quickly wins the case. Afterward, he goes to his law firm office and discovers that the gypsy caravan has settled down at the public park across the street. A young gypsy woman named Gina gives Billy a flyer for a fair later that night, but he refuses awkwardly. He then takes the stairs to his office, which leaves him extremely tired. Later, when Billy leaves the office, he bumps into Judge Rossington, who is very disgusted by the gypsies and is waiting for the cops to kick them out. Officer Hopley finally makes them leave and comes to inform Rossington that the gypsies rented some land at a nearby farm. Meanwhile, Gina approaches Billy and takes a coin out of her cleavage before raising her skirt in a flirty manner. But before he can interact, she suddenly spits on the ground and returns to her family. In the evening, Billy and Heidi go to a restaurant to celebrate his win with some friends. But when it's time for dessert, she suggests that they leave. During the trip home, Heidi tries to distract Billy from thinking about food by getting naughty with him. Meanwhile, at the local pharmacy, the gypsy chief Tadzu and his daughter are buying some medicine. The latter suddenly feels cold, so she goes out to grab her coat from her car. As she's crossing the street, Billy's car is coming her way. Since he is distracted by Heidi's naughty affection, he doesn't see the woman and fatally hits her. The next day, Billy attends an inquest. Hopley testifies that he was sober and driving within the speed limit, so Rossington rules that the death of Tadzu's daughter was purely accidental. Turns out the two are lying to help him, and Billy ends up being released without punishment. But when he gets out, we see Tadzu waiting for him. The gypsy man then approaches Billy, touches his face, and says the word thinner before walking away. Some days later, Billy checks his weight, and he's shocked to see 283, which doesn't make much sense because he's never stopped eating like a pig. Later, he goes to play golf with some friends like Rossington and Dr. Mike. They notice Billy's weight loss just by looking at him, but there's a man who still makes fun of him. Billy turns around and confidently grabs his rear, something he couldn't do when he was fatter. Afterward, in the locker room, Rossington asks Mike to check a weird thing growing on his skin, but the latter dismisses it as a symptom of stress and suggests that he put ointment on it. Meanwhile, Billy checks his weight and shockingly learns that he's lost another 2 more pounds since the morning. As the men shower, Rossington reveals that Tadzu approached him too and touched him on the spot, which now looks weird. Days pass, and Billy continues to lose weight at an alarming rate. This worries Heidi as she fears it might be an early sign of cancer, so she tells him to go see Mike. Later, at the clinic, Billy gets some tests done, and Mike looks at the results. Surprisingly, he reveals that the fat guy is perfectly healthy and should continue his normal routine. Afterward, Billy goes to his tailor and gets his measurements taken as he needs a whole new wardrobe. The numbers are so different that Billy gets on a scale to check again. To his utmost shock, he's now down to 230 pounds. That night, Billy stuffs his face with a huge amount of food during dinner with his family. Linda is appalled seeing her father's condition and asks him to stop eating too much. But he snaps back at her, asking her to mind her own business. This rude response makes the teenager angry, and she walks away without eating anything. Later, Billy explains to his wife that he skipped lunch at work, which made him lose even more weight. Thus, he came to the conclusion that he must eat thousands of calories just to keep his weight stable. It is then revealed that Linda is having a hard time watching her father eat like a maniac. So, Heidi announces that she'll send her to stay at her aunt's house for a few weeks. Later that day, Billy meets with his family doctor, Mike, at a restaurant to chat about his current problem. He had taken a blood test a day ago to see if there were any worrying signs. But the doctor explains that there is no tapeworm in Billy's blood, so he'll have to visit a clinic for further examination. Their conversation is interrupted when Billy notices Judge Rossington's wife, Lita, nearby. She looks incredibly sad and is having dinner all by herself. Mike then reveals that Rossington has gone out of town to meet his sister. But Billy finds it strange as he's certain that the judge doesn't have a sister. So, after dinner, he goes straight to Rossington's house and knocks on the door. Lita opens and initially lies that her husband is out of town visiting a relative. But when Billy mentions his drastic weight loss, she is intrigued and invites him in. As the two converse, Billy explains that he was touched by Tadzu after his court hearing. In turn, she reveals that something similar happened to Rossington on the very same day. While he was preparing to leave the car park, Tadzu approached him. The gypsy then touched Rossington's cheek while whispering, "Lizard." Lita reveals that since then, her husband's skin has been turning into scales and his hands into claws. She's sure both her husband and Billy are under a gypsy curse. Although Billy outwardly refuses to believe in such curses, he is now beginning to have his doubts. So, he calls Richie to ask if gypsy curses are real, as he is from Italy, where a lot of gypsies used to live. The mafia boss confirms they're indeed real, explaining that only the person who put the curse can remove it. Later, while Heidi is driving Billy to the clinic, he tells her about the curse. But she doesn't believe such ridiculous concepts, and the two get into an argument. For the next few days, Billy stays at the clinic, and the doctors put him through dozens of tests. However, the results are always perfect, so they can't explain what's happening. Eventually, he gets bored and leaves to visit Officer Hopley, as he was also involved in proving Billy's innocence in the car crash case. To his surprise, Hopley has also been cursed, and now his skin is covered in gross bumps. The officer gives Billy his gun and asks him to get revenge on the gypsy chief. But the latter refuses, saying he needs Tadzu alive to take off the curse. He then leaves the house, but soon hears a gunshot from inside, indicating that Hopley has self-deleted. Afterward, a disturbed Billy goes home and notices Mike leaving. This makes him suspect that his doctor and wife are having an affair. He then goes inside and immediately starts grabbing food. Soon afterward, Heidi joins him and asks if everything is okay, but he can't stop picturing her with Mike. He eventually breaks down and says he's never going back to the clinic. The next day, Billy plans to find Tadzu so he can get the curse off of him. He hires a detective who tracks down the gypsy caravan and reveals that they're in a small town on the Maine coast. Afterward, Billy drives to the town, only to find that they have left. This devastates him so much that he doesn't want to go home anymore. He instead heads toward the hotel and books a room for himself. Fortunately, he finds a flyer at the reception for a gypsy fair, similar to the one that Gina had handed him when they first met. Billy immediately heads to the fair's location and finds Tadzu and Gina selling voodoo dolls of him and his friends. The gypsies also notice him and start chasing him around the fair. Soon after, Rossington arrives there in his car and lets Billy inside. The two then drive off and reach a bridge, but Tadzu shows up in a fire truck and crashes right into them. At this moment, Billy wakes up in the hotel, revealing that all this was merely a nightmare. Worried, he tries calling Rossington, but Lita answers the phone instead. She gives him the horrible news that her husband, Una, lived himself earlier that day. In the next scene, a desperate Billy heads to the fair, but it's been abandoned. He asks around, and a man points him towards a shady-looking road. That evening, Billy follows the road and eventually finds the gypsy camp. He approaches Gina for help, but she refuses to have a conversation with him, calling him a demon. When he continues begging, she slingshots a stone at him, which pierces through his hand. In the aftermath of this incident, Billy rushes back to the hotel and wraps his hand the best he can, but he clearly needs help. He then calls his friend, Richie, who gives him the address to a farmhouse and suggests he wait there. Billy obliges, and half an hour later, a doctor arrives and treats his wound. The next day, Richie visits the farmhouse and informs Billy that his wife has signed a legal paper to forcefully admit him to a mental hospital. Since the lawyer had helped him in the past, he's now ready to return the favor. Hence, Richie sneaks into the gypsy camp at night and poisons all the dogs. He then leaves a note, warning them to take off the curse. Unfortunately, the next day, the mafia boss and Billy see a car outside their hotel with a message from the gypsies. The front seat has the body of a young man whom Richie had paid to spy on the camp. There's a chicken head in his mouth and the word never on his forehead as an answer to Richie's note. This infuriates the mafia boss so much that he decides to take matters into his own hands. He then grabs his weapons and gets ready for revenge, ignoring Billy's pleas not to cause any violence. In the evening, Richie sneaks into the gypsy camp and knocks down Gina's husband. He then indiscriminately opens fire, killing a lot of gypsies and destroying their vehicles. One of the cars even explodes and starts to fire. Once Richie is done with his onslaught, he leaves the camp with a note on Gina's husband's body, asking for the curse to be taken off. The next day, the police come over to the camp to investigate. Richie pretends to be an FBI agent to talk to Gina and convinces her to follow him into a barn house. Once there, he smacks her head with a gun, knocking her down. Just when he's about to kill her, Billy shows up and pleads with him for mercy. But Richie has a more twisted plan, and he puts a jar with acid on her forehead. He then leaves a message for Tadzu to meet him and Billy at the lighthouse in 2 hours. After the men are gone, Gina carefully moves her arms to get rid of the acid and runs back to her people. Seeing all the bloodshed this fiasco has caused, Tadzu finally agrees to Richie's demands. He comes to the lighthouse and says he will lift the curse off the lawyer. But to do so, the curse must be transferred to another person. Tadzu chants a spell, stabs Billy's wounded hand, and lets the blood drip into a pie. He states that if someone else eats the pie, the curse will kill them quickly and Billy will be spared. He urges the lawyer to eat it himself and die with dignity, but the latter has a sinister idea in mind. Billy plans to feed the pie to his wife as revenge for her affair. Later, he returns to his house, already looking a lot healthier than he has been for weeks. He then cuts the pie and gives a slice to Heidi. She gladly eats it despite being slightly suspicious of her husband's unusually upbeat mood. After this, the couple heads to their bedroom, leaving the rest of the pie in the kitchen. The next morning, Billy wakes up and is pleased to find Heidi's rotting body next to him. He even kisses her on the mouth to taste the sugar. However, when he goes downstairs, he discovers Linda is already back. To his utter horror, she has also taken a bite of the cursed pie. After she leaves for school, Billy feels extremely guilty and thinks of committing the unthinkable by eating the rest of the pie. But right then, he hears a knock on the door and goes to check it. Standing there is Mike, who looks visibly surprised to see Billy back. As the credits roll, Billy invites Mike in for some pie and closes the door with a smirk. The movie ends here. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.